All right. I believe we're live. I'm going to go ahead and say welcome to another 21-minute live event. Joining me today is Christina Anderson, Marketing Coordinator at Cheshire Impact and the host of the popular Pardot Life Hacks podcast as we continue our quest to Salesforce responsibly. Christina, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Eric. Thank you so much for having me.
I appreciate you jumping in. For those that don't know, I got a chance to participate on the Pardot Life Hacks podcast recently. We had some really good conversations. This time around, we're going to try to answer in 21 minutes some Pardot conversations as we launch our Pardot Responsibly segue here. We're going to talk a little bit about some segmentations. We're going to try to answer what field should people seriously consider adding to Salesforce when they're looking to properly segment, right, in a successful Pardot integration. We want to talk about how to prevent a sales user anxiety of adding contacts to Salesforce because they fear that Pardot will automatically start bombarding them with unnecessary emails. And finally, we're going to try to cover a little bit about at what point should a sales user be notified that a prospect in Pardot deserves their attention. All really big topics because Pardot is a lot about the marketing effort and the marketing side, but there are real challenges with making sure that this talks well with sales. And Christina, I'm super excited to have you here so we can kind of try to address some of that, right? And kind of clarify some of these myths. So let's jump right in. Christina, tell me really quick, again, when we're looking to do a successful Pardot integration and we want to specifically talk about segmentation, what are some of the good tricks that we should keep in mind, right, when we're looking to set up that implementation?
So with it being said, think about your ideal customer profile. Who does sales want to be talking to? And I highly suggest that marketing needs to sit down with sales and have that conversation first. That's number one. Once you find out that ideal customer profile that you're looking for, think about how that ICP is broken up. Is it a particular industry? Is it a particular role? Is it in a particular location? Or is there a specific product or service interest that your audience should have? So with all of that in mind, you then have to think about, okay, how am I going to collect this data? So there's a couple ways to do that. Number one, you can use progressive profiling on your Pardot forms to add fields to those forms, collect that information, and then that way, each time someone comes back to your forms, they're giving you new information. That's number one. Number two, the other side that you need to be thinking about when properly segmenting is where is the person in their journey with you? Okay, so for example, are they a customer? If they're a customer, should they be suppressed from certain information? Are they at a particular stage regarding their opportunity with you? Are you about to close a deal with them? Should they maybe not receive a promotional email from you? So with those in mind, you would then need to make sure that that data is updated in Salesforce in order to make sure that those suppression lists are properly executed. Now, with all of that, one of my favorite things about Pardot is dynamic lists. And you can create lists that are automatically updated based on certain criteria. You can do that for your recipient list and you can do it for your suppression lists. There's multiple ways of doing that. And then, so that was a lot. I'll let you kind of unpack some of that or ask any follow-up questions.
Yeah, I mean, I'll share one of the things because I think it's a ton to unpack, right? And for me, one of the little takeaways that I've used with some clients that I think you mentioned a little bit was, on the contact field in Salesforce, we usually do like some drop downs for roles and departments where departments may be sales, marketing, operations, whatever departments to categorize it that way. And then the roles are like manager, VP, director, C-level executive. And we've used a lot of that to be able to properly segment it. So that way, right, when it gets to dynamic lists, which that's a conversation on its own, I'm also a big fan, suppression lists and all of these other items. but at least you don't rely on title, because title is like a big text field that you have to go right and kind of, if there is marketing or if there is sales or if there's this, and kind of like play the guessing game with tons of contain rules. And you have something a little bit more specific, which for me has always been extremely helpful with some of the implementations that I ran across. I don't know if you have also a little secret trick on your side that you like to share.
No, I would definitely agree. Drop down fields they help you keep your data clean, and text fields are an absolute data nightmare. So no, I completely agree on using those. And then also too, I mean, to help make sure that data gets updated, you can either use get with your admin, you can use validation rules, or you can have them build workflows or something in Process Builder, where if sales comes and updates one thing, then that field will automatically get updated as well.
Right. And we could go on this for days, right? I think that I agree on the validation rules, and you definitely have to have the Salesforce admin, right? If you as the Pardot individual and the Salesforce admin are two different individuals, right, which very very often it can be, I think some good alignment there would be big. And like I said, like you said, the validation rules can be super helpful. But let's segue into this conversation then, because I think it's a really interesting point to the second part, and I'll start it with the story, because I had a customer that there was a sales user, and they were literally not entering in their contacts because of fear that they were saying, hey, if I just put this contact in the database, Pardot's going to pick this up and automatically start sending out emails, right? They were just bombarding them with unnecessary emails. So kind of in that mindset of things that we can do to help companies that are struggling, right, with the sales users using the system because of fear that Pardot might do things that they don't want to their leads or their contacts. What are some of the things that you would do to help prevent that? Like, how can a company go at it from there?
So one of the things that I definitely wanted to touch on regarding this is marketing data sharing rules. And it's only available if you are using the Pardot Lightning app or have Pardot Advanced Edition. But the reason why it's so helpful is because, yes, naturally, you may only want to send a specific subset of lead or contacts over. So what you can do with these is you can update your connector and set up those marketing data sharing rules to only send over specific leads or contacts based on a certain fields. Now, this can also work with custom fields too. So if you only want to send over a specific subset based on a custom field that you've set up, that could work too. Now, the thing to keep in mind with this is if you have to create that rule both for leads and contacts. If you have multiple business units, you have to do this across each business unit as well. Another cool thing, if you go to import prospects into Pardot and they don't meet those data sharing rules, they're automatically archived. So that's just another fail-safe.
Gotcha. That's some really interesting things. On my side, I'm actually trying to think how I can relate to that one, because the way that we worked on it with our customer was that we were trying to actually go into the suppression lists, and we were trying to come up with something that would basically state, hey, if you if you opt out, like there was an opt out, like an extra opt out that we created to say, hey, make sure that this doesn't go to Pardot. And what we ended up doing from a Salesforce side was that we were working on the Pardot to make sure that the dynamic list filtered out anybody that had it. And then at the same time, we were notifying the marketing team that someone entered in some contacts that, again, were asked not to market. So that way they could take a look at it and get a better understanding. From your perspective, because again, I've done quite a bit of product, but my core focus is on the sales, the community cloud, and other clouds. But is that a decent technique? Would you change that around if someone doesn't have like the advanced sharing settings?
I think that a dynamic suppression list is a great way to go. And because you can base that on a few different pieces of criteria. So for example, if there is a specific contact status, if there's a point in their journey where you don't want communication to go to them, you could use that. You could also use it based on Pardot score. So think about it. Typically, like setup default wise, if a prospect completes a form, their Pardot score is goes up to added 50 points. Okay. So them completing your form, then that's starting for them to show interest in your content. If you really want to play it extra safe, I mean, I don't know if I would suggest doing this, but it's completely up to your company and how much you want to suppress communication. If you don't want them to receive communication until they've completed at least 2 of your forms, then you could set that dynamic list criteria to, if they have a Pardot score of less than 100, like suppress them. That is one way, because then you'll know for sure whether or not they're actually interested in receiving your marketing content, aside from just doing business with you.
That's an interesting point. So to elaborate on that a little bit, let's say we have Pardot and Salesforce integrated, for those that are, listening in and are just curious, if I put in the contact through Salesforce, will Pardot score and grade that individual before any emails sent out? So for example, because the grading is done at the Pardot level, right? So how is the order of operations? Like, does the contact get pulled from Salesforce to Pardot, gets graded, and then the suppression list will run? Or is that something that can, or could it happen the other way, that perhaps you run into an error and they, like the suppression list doesn't catch it because it gets graded after the fact?
Well, so grade and score is separate. Score is a numeric value, where grade is a letter, and grade is according to that person's profile and that criteria. So for example, if they are a decision maker in a certain industry, and that completely agrees with your ICP, then they might receive a score or a grade of A. For your score is based on the prospect's engagement, how interested they are in you. So when a contact first comes over to Pardot and they don't, like, for example, let's say they haven't completed a form yet, then they wouldn't have they wouldn't have a high enough score, depending on what your threshold is for that suppression list. So let's say if you say, I don't want anyone with like less than a score of 75, for them to receive communication, then that person coming over, that's not going to make them not meet that criteria, if that makes sense.
Right. And is there a way that the salesperson could easily be notified of that? Or should you come up with some sort of automation rule, like, because the salesperson doesn't go to Pardot, right? That's Pardot kind of doing Pardot. And the salesperson, if they're, how can we reassure a salesperson that that person won't be communicated or won't get into any marketing campaigns just because you inserted them? Like, maybe later on, the marketing person can ask for permission, or actually maybe on a greater scheme of conversation, how should, companies are different, but how would you recommend the generic way of going of the relationship, saying, hey, salesperson is like, hey, I want to put contacts in the system, but I don't want to market them. But if the marketing team deems it useful or deems it that it may be important, how do you balance that out? Like, how do you build more on the process, right, perspective? How do you balance all those, that agreement between departments, so to say?
So for one, that is a great question, because in my eyes, for someone to not receive, all right, so there's a couple pieces to that. So number one, marketing, talk to sales, get aligned with them, share with them what you're doing. Like, what kind of communications are you sending out? What type of content? How does it align with the different pieces of the buyer's journey that their leads and contacts are going through? What kind of marketing do you have on the customer side? So once sales understands all of this, and because your marketing should A, be providing value, and B, reinforcing that relationship and giving that lead or contact a positive experience with your brand. The only time that I could see like something extremely negative happening is if you're sending out promotional kind of like, oh, buy this and you get this service for 50% off kind of a thing. I could see that going awry if they're in the middle of a deal that is about to close. Okay, like that I don't recommend. But just align with them and help them see the value of what you're providing. That's number one. Because in my eyes, like sales should not be afraid for their contacts to receive marketing emails unless it's completely off target. But in that case, like, why is the person a contact and you're selling to them? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, it's definitely should be a specific target audience. Number two, with that being said, if the salesperson is saying, okay, I'm about to upload these contacts, I don't want them to receive any marketing emails, then that should be a specific contact status agreed upon between your marketing and sales team. And then that should be a suppression list built in Pardot to suppress any contact with that particular status. The other way that you can put in the fail safe is I would communicate with your admin and see if there can be some sort of validation rule added or automatically update that particular status. So if a salesperson goes to create that contact and they don't update that contact status, then they can't save the record. Like they need to be able to update that status, because if it's going to be that much of a worry to the sales team, then that's when a requirement should happen on the data side. The sales team can't get mad at marketing for marketing to the audience and building that relationship if sales is not going to keep up their end of the bargain and make sure that that particular field that they're asking for is updated.
It's a really, really interesting point, because I try to put myself in the shoes of salespeople, and with all due respect to salespeople, I feel like it's very difficult to take them out of their world sometimes, because they want to be able to sell, right? It's clear cut, and I think it's maybe the nature of the deal, because for them they want to sell. They're based on the numbers, the quotas, their commissions. And for them, they're more focused like, I want to do me, right? I want to do what's important for me to be able to hit my numbers, and guiding them to try to explain, hey, this is what marketing needs. So marketing can kind of try to, even if it's, the long-term view is to, generate more leads or activate more leads, right? Qualify, generate all the interest, right? Effectively raising the Pardot grade, the Pardot score. It's interesting because there is a lot of, they don't see it that far away, and it's kind of tough to kind of win that argument with them and get them to your side by providing that. So if I'm understanding correctly here, just on some takeaways, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems we're hearing that, listen, if a salesperson is entering contacts in a battle between marketing and sales, it is the sales person's job to choose what they want to be done to that contact, right? So there needs to be put something in place, whether it's a status or whatever the case may be, maybe preferably defaulted to that status, to not email, right? That suppression status. And then kind of, get into a conversation as to, do we want to put them on the list later on versus not, and try to see what you can do. Is that pretty much in line, or like, did I miss anything?
Correct. The only other piece that I wanted to quickly address is like double email opt-ins and GDPR. So because I'm thinking about that, I'm like, we haven't even brought this up yet. It's kind of a big deal. We should
let's throw safe harbor in there as well. Just like, forward vision statements. We'll throw all of the disclaimers in this.
So with all of that said, one thing also too that you want to keep in mind is On the other side, sales may think, oh, well, I really don't want this person to receive like promotional communication. Okay. You can completely segment that out based on the criteria set upon. Yes, as we've discussed. But on the other side, too, if that person is genuinely interested in your content, for example, they love your blog, what's the harm in them receiving that? So that if they go to that form and then they actually like opt in, say, yes, I want to subscribe to your blog and I want to receive your other marketing communication, like, you know what I mean? Your other updates, the double opt-in, then they're saying, yes, please email me.
Yeah.
So be sure to really sit down with sales and explain the difference your between your different types of marketing communication that you're sending out, because as I said earlier, promotional communication is very different from like, hey, we have this great event coming up that deals with all these pain points that you may have been experiencing in your particular industry. We'd love to have you there.
Right. Okay. So are we graduating now to talking about like perhaps different types of statuses for like suppression purposes, like, full blown hit them with everything we have, or promote specific events only to fully opt it out? Like how are we going in this one?
So there's a few different ways to do it. One, and I got to give a shout out to Casey Cheshire for this one. This is definitely one of his favorite Pardot Life hacks is a global suppression list. So you may have different suppression lists created for different reasons, whether it's specific, again, like promotional emails, or it could be your partner suppression list if you want your partners receiving different communication from people that could potentially buy from you. That could happen. And then there are times where you may send an email out and think, okay, I don't want this to go to anyone that is on any kind of suppression list. You can then create a dynamic global suppression list and say, okay, if a prospect is a member of any of these lists, they're on the global suppression list. You can add that in, and then you don't, and then it's kind of like your extra fail safe of, okay,
Right.
so no one, right? Because one thing, one of my coworkers, Logan Childs, that I love that he says is because who you're not emailing and who you're not sending the communication to is almost just as important, if not more important sometimes, as the people that are actually getting those emails.
I think that's like the bombshell of the conversation here, because that hits. I think that hits a lot of key talking points, right, in marketing in general. That's he should trademark that one. That's a good one. But yeah. So with the little time that we have left, is there a point that or at what point should the sales user be notified, right, that a prospecting product deserves their attention? Is it as simple as saying we hit a certain score, right, because they've done enough things, or is there something else that you also want people to keep in mind to say, hey, salespeople should be aware of what's going on at this point?
So there's a couple of things you could do with that. You could do it based on score, meaning that they've expressed interest in you, but that can be a danger because sometimes you have students doing research that have these ridiculously high scores because they're consuming all this content, but they're never actually going to buy from you. So I would suggest doing it based on score and grade in terms of what their profile is. So if someone is a decision maker, think about it. If someone is a decision maker at an account that's already in your pipeline, they just filled out your blog subscribe form, why wouldn't you want to reach out to them and say, hey, I noticed like you subscribed to our blog. Here's some great content to get you started. Would love to chat sometime, or whatever you want the message to be. That's one. The other way that you can do it too, and what we do is actually we have a hot lead checkbox. So for example, if someone completes our contact us form or our request a consultation form, that checkbox automatically gets marked. And then that person is sent over to sales with the notification of, because you can do either on the completion action of that form or based on your automation rules. If you have automation rules and Pardot sent over, like saying, hey, flag sales if X happens, then if someone becomes like your quote unquote hot lead, sales should definitely be notified about that.
Right. So interesting insights. The only answer I usually get for why wouldn't you want to notify them right away is that it's creepy as hell when you're there as a customer and like you're just like, I just hit subscribe and you're calling me. So but that may be a whole conversation for a separate story. But I definitely think it's really cool because you probably do want to strike while the iron's hot, or I think I might have completely destroyed that analogy there, but yeah, you gotta take advantage of it while it's fresh in their minds. We get busy, we all get busy throughout our days and everything, and so if someone's thinking of you, you might want to capitalize on that. But I think that one, everyone may have their own opinions. Listen, we're a little bit over time, but I really want to thank you, Christina. Anything you want to kind of conclude with, close it off on this call?
Two things, definitely. A, thank you so much for having me. I had an amazing time. B, one workaround that you can do for that, rather than having just the salesperson reach out a call saying like, oh, this is kind of creepy. Totally get that. Try and have them lead with a piece of content first. If you're genuinely providing value to someone, then they're less likely to view it as like a sales conversation, more of like, hey, this person actually kind of cares about me. Yeah, I'm down to chat with them. And you can even do that with like a very short engagement studio, or you can do it with a completion action and use an autoresponder email from the salesperson.
All right. Well, some good
tips.
Some good tips in there, or just start every phone call with, I don't mean to be creepy, but so we can totally give that a shot. But listen, Christina, it was a pleasure having you. Thank you so much for participating. Guys, for everyone that's watching, Pardot Life Hacks is the podcast. Make sure to check it out. There's a lot of good information in there. I want to give a big shout out to anyone from the Fort Lauderdale admin community that's watching in. And as always, as Uncle Ben used to say, with great power comes great responsibility. So remember to always Salesforce and Pardot responsibly, so that way you can keep building amazing solutions out there. Guys, I appreciate it. We'll see you all on the next one. Thank you, Christina. And we'll catch everyone on the next one.
Bye. Thank you.
Yeah. And slight technical difficulty on mine for anyone that's watching. My keyboard ran out of battery, so I will do this and hit end stream on manual. And end. There we go.